The bullet tore through the air just 2 inches from my head. I ducked instinctively, my heart sinking into my stomach, ears ringing with adrenaline. The café's glass window behind me shattered into pieces. Screams, chaos, footsteps pounding the asphalt. Someone grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the alley. Faster! Barked a familiar voice. Joe Fay. Even in panic I recognized his husky baritone. He was practically dragging me along, shielding me with his body from possible shots. We dove behind the corner of the building, and he pressed me against the brick wall, breathing heavily. Are you hurt? His dark eyes scanned me quickly from head to toe. I shook my head, still unable to say a word. My hands trembled, my knees threatened to give way. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number quickly. Mo Tao, they've spotted us. They tried to kill Lien Na. Yes, I'm with her. Send backup to Michigan Avenue, corner of State Street. Only then it hit me, I was home. In Chicago. And someone already wanted me dead. Before that, I was standing in the grand lobby of the Long Mansion, inhaling the familiar mix of scents, expensive tobacco, marble, and that specific aroma of power you could never mistake for anything else. The tall wrought iron gates behind me had just slammed shut, cutting me off from the outside world. Or protecting me from it. In our family, the line between protection and prison had always been blurred. Lien Na. A loud voice rang out, and my brother ran down the stairs. Mo Tao looked older than I remembered. 3 years was a long time, especially in his business. New wrinkles around his eyes, gray at his temples, but the same confident stride, the same piercing gaze of the head of the family organization. Hey, brother, I forced a smile, allowing him to hug me. I missed you, he whispered, and there was honesty in his voice. The house wasn't the same without its little sister. I looked around. Yes, everything was as luxurious and cold as ever. White marble, crystal chandeliers, expensive paintings. But something had changed. More guards. More tension. And that faint scent of danger I had never noticed so sharply before. What's going on, Mo Tao? I asked, noticing how his men exchanged glances. Why are you surrounded by an entire army? Times have changed, he replied evasively. Competition has gotten fiercer. But don't worry, we've got it under control. That's when I saw him. Joe Fay stood in the library doorway, arms crossed over his chest. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the same piercing dark eyes and soldier's posture. Time seemed not to have touched him, the same hard features, the same cold detachment. But when our eyes met, something flickered in his gaze. Something familiar, something that made my heart skip a beat. Joe Fay, I nodded, trying to keep my tone indifferent. Lien Na, his voice was emotionless, but I caught a faint tension in it. Welcome back. Mo Tao glanced between us, his face darkening slightly. Joe Fay is my deputy now, he said. And your personal bodyguard for the time being, until we deal with certain problems. A bodyguard? I protested. Mo Tao, I'm 25, not 15. And that's exactly why you understand the seriousness of the situation, he shot back firmly. We're at war, Lien Na. And you are one of the main targets. War. The word hung in the air, heavy and threatening. I looked at Joe Fay, who silently watched our exchange. In his eyes I read determination. He would follow Mo Tao's order, whether I liked it or not. Fine, I exhaled. But I'm not going to sit locked up. I have things to do in the city. Then Joe Fay will go with you, my brother declared flatly. The car's in 2 minutes, Joe Fay said, putting away his phone. Stay close to me. I nodded, looking at his stern face. 3 years ago I had been a girl in love with my brother's untouchable friend. Now I was a woman with enemies who wanted me gone. And the only thing standing between me and a bullet was the man I once loved. Or maybe still did. The sound of an approaching engine made us both tense. Joe Fay instinctively stepped forward, shielding me with his body. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the alley entrance. Ours, he breathed when he recognized the plates. But as we got into the car, I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. And I realized danger wasn't only outside. The greatest threat might come from my own heart. Welcome home, Lien Na. The next morning I woke up early, unable to pretend I could still sleep until noon. Energy churned inside me. I threw on a light robe and walked to the window, looking out at the street. The garden around the house was shrouded in morning fog, blurring the statues and plants. Just like when I was a child, dark beauty and a sense of lurking danger. I went down to the living room, where 2 guards were already on duty. One of them, Jong Woo-jin, a young Korean MO Tao had hired a few months ago after spotting his martial arts talent. He nodded to me respectfully, but without unnecessary emotion. In our family, security never asked questions. I returned the smile and headed to the kitchen for coffee. After finishing my cup, I walked into my brother's office without knocking. He stood by the window, smoking a cigar and speaking tensely on the phone. Beside him, arms folded, stood Joe Fay. At the sight of me, his face softened slightly, though his eyes said, "Why are you here?" I ignored the look and placed a stack of papers on the desk, my ideas for the design of the new entertainment complex our family planned to open under a legal front. Lien Na, Mo Tao said after hanging up. I told you I'm busy. And I want to be part of this business, too, I said firmly. I made some sketches, they could help attract an audience. You don't want your new club to look like a soulless cliché, do you? I saw irritation flash in his eyes, but also a spark of curiosity. He skimmed through the sketches, then said, "We'll talk later. I have a meeting now. Go, get some rest." I clenched my teeth to keep from snapping back. I wanted to say I was old enough to be present, but I kept silent. I cast a glance at Joe Fay. He looked at me intently, almost piercingly, yet kept utterly calm. As I was leaving, I overheard my brother say to him, "Damn it, I don't like that Lien Na sticks her nose into these matters. She's too curious. You'll have to keep an eye on her." I exhaled loudly outside the door. Always under watch is the little sister. But that wasn't all. I knew a dinner was planned for the evening in honor of my return, with several family friends attending, including Uncle Pak Miho, who used to help our father secure deals with Asian partners. It would be a chance to show that I had changed. Maybe I could surprise them with my ideas at dinner. The rest of the day I wandered through the mansion, as if seeing it for the first time. At some point I went into the inner courtyard, where I saw Joe Fay training with Jong Woo-jin. They were practicing strikes, quick combinations. Joe Fay's gaze was utterly focused. I froze, watching the fluidity of his movements. He radiated raw strength and dangerous grace at once. Noticing me, Jong Woo-jin paused and gave me a slight bow, while Joe Fay turned and stopped the training. I stepped closer. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt," I said shyly, though in truth I wanted to see his reaction. "It's fine," Joe Fay replied. We were finished anyway. I noticed the way he looked at me, from under slightly furrowed brows, with cautious curiosity. As if studying what role I was about to play in this house. "You've changed," he added after a pause. "You've become different." "I hope for the better," I replied, trying to keep a confident tone. "Though for you, I suppose it would be easier if I stayed the obedient girl." "I never said that would be better," he countered evenly. "Just remember, not all changes are for the good." I frowned, almost ready to argue. But there was such genuine concern in his voice, wrapped in coldness, yes, but still real, that my heart gave a painful throb. I nodded, unwilling to continue the quarrel. "See you tonight," I said, turning to leave. I could feel his gaze on my back. That shadow. It was always near me. The shadow of a man bound to my brother and yet somehow stirring my heart. No matter how I tried to deny it, I wanted to know what went on in his mind, and why he was so afraid of warmth. When I got into the car to go meet with the stylist I needed to update my wardrobe before the official dinner, I had no idea that half an hour later my life would take a sharp turn. Usually I went alone, without an escort, believing no one considered me an important security target. I was too much of a small fish in the ocean of our mafia world. Mo Tao always objected, but I insisted on having freedom at least in small things. The car slowly rolled out of the mansion gates, and I leaned back in the seat, savoring the feeling. Finally, I could move through the city on my own. The driver, a quiet man named Nzua, drove carefully, never speeding. The streets were relatively calm, and I stared out the window, noting the changes in Chicago's landscape after so many years away. Suddenly I heard a loud crack, and the window beside me shattered into pieces. I screamed in shock, ducking instinctively. A bullet! It was definitely a gunshot. My heart plummeted as if the ground had dropped away. The car swerved, and Zwa must not have expected the attack either. But he quickly regained control of the wheel and slammed the gas. 2 more cracks, and the windshield splintered. We managed to break away from the pursuers. I caught a glimpse of a black SUV in the mirror, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. And Zwa turned onto a narrow street and stopped, breathing heavily. Panicked, I ran my hands over myself to make sure I hadn't been hit. Everything seemed intact, though my ear rang and adrenaline roared in my veins. "Miss Lien Na, are you all right?" Nzua asked, turning to me. "Yes. I think so," I whispered, breathless. "What was that?" "I don't know. But we can't stay here. We're going back to the mansion." I nodded, clenching my fists. Fear and fury swirled inside me. Never had danger come so close. As we drove back, I trembled, trying to understand who could have ordered the hit. And why? I wasn't playing a decisive role. Or maybe those targeting Mo Tao had decided his sister was an easy bargaining chip. When we finally pulled into the courtyard, several cars and my brother's men were already waiting. I saw him running toward us, his face twisted with rage and panic. Zhou Fei followed behind him. "Lien Na." Mo Tao pulled me from the car, gripping my shoulders and scanning me from head to toe as if to reassure himself I was alive. "Damn it, how could this happen?" "I don't know," I whispered, my horror mixing with relief. "Someone shot at us." His hands tightened on my shoulders until it hurt, but I didn't protest. It was his way of confirming I was safe. "Zhou Fei." He barked without looking back. "From this moment, Lien Na doesn't take a single step without you. Do you understand?" I shifted my gaze to Zhou Fei. His face remained cold, but a dangerous fire burned in his dark eyes. He nodded. "Understood." I wanted to protest that I didn't need guarding, but the memory of that terror silenced me. Maybe having such a protector wasn't the worst idea. My life would never be the same now. A shiver ran down my spine. Being a target was terrifying, yet deep inside a strange resolve began to spark. I wouldn't let myself be broken. The entire next day passed in tension. Mo Tao gathered nearly all our guards in the house to discuss the situation. I overheard fragments of conversation. Someone declared war, old debts, a threat to Lien Na. But no one addressed me directly. I was kept aside yet again. Now I was officially under protection. Which meant Zhou Fei was literally at my heels every step of the way. The morning began with him appearing at my doorway, his face grim as he quietly said, "I'll be accompanying you." That formal tone infuriated me. Why not simply say you instead of you formal? Why that cold distance? But I understood. Tension flickered in his eyes, and he hid his concern behind a mask of indifference. Since the driver, Nzua, had gone to the workshop to repair the car under Mo Tao's orders and hadn't returned, Zhou Fei himself took the wheel when I needed to go into the city. He drove with steady, emotionless precision, saying almost nothing. I longed to ask him so much, but I dreaded his curt replies. In the city we made a few stops. I went into a boutique on Michigan Avenue, where a stylist named So-yeon was waiting. She was Korean, a talented designer who had worked with me remotely while I was in Europe. I valued her professionalism and cheeky humor. She had a way of lifting my spirits. When we met, So-yeon widened her eyes at the sight of my grim companion, then pulled me into the fitting room. "Who's that?" "He's so intense. My bodyguard," I admitted softly, hardly believing I was saying the words. "Wow, what a life you've got." She snorted, adjusting the fabric of the new dress on me. "Listen, Lien Na, if he gets on your nerves, I've got a friend in Seoul who's way friendlier." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, it's not that. It's just, he's my brother's man. We grew up together, but now he feels like a cold wall between us." "Sometimes walls get torn down," So-yeon winked. "Depends on how you want to live." Her words lodged themselves in my mind. I remembered that fleeting moment at the party when Jo Fei looked at me. Was there really a spark of something beyond indifference? After the fitting, we stepped out of the boutique. Jo Fei stood by the entrance, arms crossed. My gaze fell to his hands, large, calloused. Heat rushed through me. He pointed silently at the car. "Let's go." I nodded. On the way back, I decided to lift the veil between us just a little. "Listen," I began, trying to sound calm, "thank you for agreeing to protect me. I know it's my brother's order, but still." He kept his eyes fixed on the road, as if afraid to glance at me. "It's my job," he replied evenly. "And besides, you're Mo-Tao's sister." A sting of hurt cut through me. He was emphasizing that I was nothing more than the boss's sister. Nothing else. But once, we had been closer. Or was it just my imagination? I remembered being 16, looking up at him with wide-eyed admiration, and that one time he gave me a hidden smile when he caught me sneaking a book late at night. I decided to challenge him. "Yes, I'm Mo-Tao's sister. But I have my own life. Don't forget that." He cast me a quick glance, and for a moment pain flickered in his eyes. Then the mask of indifference returned. "I don't forget. That's why I'll follow you everywhere." Goosebumps ran over my skin, born of fear mixed with a dark attraction. I turned back to the window, watching the city roll past. Inside me, a spark of defiance ignited. I wouldn't let him keep me at a distance. The day dragged on painfully. The tension after the attack hadn't lifted. The house was wrapped in an invisible aura of fear. Mo-Tao spent hours in the basement holding meetings, settling delicate matters. From there emerged a terrified, bow-legged intermediary named Cho Bom. I went to bed deep into the night, but sleep wouldn't come. As soon as I closed my eyes, flashes of gunfire and shattering glass replayed before me. My throat tightened with a lump of fear. I only managed to drift off toward morning, but my rest was fitful, full of nightmares. I woke to my own scream. I had been dreaming I was back in the car, bullets striking the glass while I sat frozen, unable to move. I jolted upright, drenched in cold sweat, my heart pounding wildly. Suddenly, the door flew open and Jo Fei burst into the room. He pressed himself against the wall, weapon ready, but when he saw me alone, in tears and confusion, he slowly lowered his gun. I recoiled. Fear, despair, and relief flooded me all at once. Jo Fei stepped forward. The moonlight lit only part of the room, carving tense shadows across his face. "Are you all right?" he asked in a hushed voice. "I heard you scream." I had a nightmare," I whispered, covering my face with my hands. "That gunshot. That car. I can't shake the terror." He hesitated, torn between keeping his distance and offering me comfort. At last, he sat on the edge of the bed. I could feel his uneven breath. "You have nothing to fear. I'm here," he said quietly. "No one will dare hurt you again." Tears welled in my eyes, and before I could think, I touched his hand. His muscles were taut, wound tight like a spring. "Joe Fay," I almost whispered, "thank you for coming." He said nothing, only gazed into my eyes. And suddenly, I felt something spark between us. I couldn't name it, gratitude, attraction, mingled fear. I leaned closer, hardly aware of what I was doing. My heart thundered. His face was so near, just inches away. In the dark, I felt his breath, warm, unsteady, as quick as mine. My lips nearly brushed his, but then he jerked back, fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. "No," he forced out, standing up. "Forgive me. I shouldn't." He stepped back, breathing heavily. In his eyes, I glimpsed a storm of conflict. A burn of disappointment and shame filled me, though I knew it wasn't my fault. Joe Fay was more afraid of that closeness than I was. "Rest, Liam Na," he said curtly. "If you need anything, I'll be nearby." Then he left, leaving me shaken. I pressed my hand to my lips, trying to calm the rush of blood in my ears. What had that been? Almost a kiss? What madness was creeping into my head? Yet I knew for certain, it wasn't just adrenaline. A real, frightening desire had flared within me. And in that instant, I realized he felt it too. He just wouldn't let himself admit it. After that night, my view of Raphael shifted even more. Now it seemed every time he was near, the air crackled. We rarely spoke, but our glances said more than words. I noticed how he tensed whenever I drew close. And that tension gave me strange satisfaction, proof I wasn't indifferent to him. One day we set out for one of my family's country houses, and Mo Tao insisted I leave the city while the attack was being investigated. Naturally, I was accompanied by my bodyguard. The car hummed quietly along the highway, fields and scattered homes stretching around us. The stillness weighed on me. I longed for the bustle of the city. Yet sitting beside Raphael, I felt a fragile calm wrapped in tension. "Do you miss Europe?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "Yes," I admitted. There, I could be myself. Free of family obligations. "And free of me," he added, something crooked in his tone, almost mocking himself. I looked at him. His eyes were hidden behind his glasses, but the tightness along his jaw betrayed him. "In Europe I often thought about you," I risked confessing, staring straight at the road. "Wondered if you were managing with your work." He shifted slightly, his frame growing tauter. "I just did what I had to. Made sure Mo Tao kept everything under control." I remembered how he once said he'd fought in war zones, how the army had shown him the horrors of battle. Maybe that was why he built such walls around himself. But I knew, behind that armor was a living heart. "Don't you ever tire of living only for duty?" The words escaped me. Everyone deserves personal desires, their own feelings. He fell silent, as if caught off guard. I waited for an answer that never came. At last, he pulled the car to a stop by the country house, and we stepped outside. A light breeze stirred the tall grass. The place looked idyllic, a modest villa, fields, quiet. But we both knew we weren't here for rest, only for safety. The day passed uneventfully. I wandered through the house, studying the paintings, thumbing through forgotten books. Joe Fay stayed nearby but respected my space. By evening, I lingered on the veranda, watching the sunset stain the sky pink and gold. Eventually, he came out and sat a few steps away. "Beautiful picture," he said, pointing at the sky. I smiled, though he couldn't see it with my back to him. "Yes. I missed these. Europe has its sunsets, but here, they're special." We sat in silence a while, until I dared to speak. "Thank you for staying with me that time when I was afraid." I left the rest unsaid, the memory of that night unspoken. "I really appreciate it." Joe Fay pressed his lips together, then answered softly, "I just needed to be sure you were safe. I hate seeing people I care about suffer." My heart clenched. His words were cautious, chosen carefully to hide too much. Yet I caught a glimpse of his true nature, caring, capable of deep feeling. I turned toward him, and our eyes met. The warm evening light softened his gaze. The moment stretched, tangible in the quiet air. I longed to move closer, to feel his warmth. But he lowered his eyes and stood. "Time to check the perimeter," he murmured, disappearing into the house. I stayed behind, alone with his unsaid words. My heart pounded so loudly it could be heard a mile away. And I knew the wall between us had cracked, and one day it would crumble completely. When we returned to Chicago a few days later, my brother's anxious look awaited me. He told me the threat hadn't vanished, unknown people were still trying to track me down. Who they were remained a mystery. Perhaps a rival faction, hoping to pressure Imhotep by striking at his weakest link, me. "We'll tighten surveillance," he said firmly. "Joe Fei, install cameras around the perimeter. And Liang Na, please, don't try to slip away. This is serious." I pressed my lips together, holding back a sharp retort. I was scared too. And above all, I didn't want to endanger anyone else. Yes, I was stubborn, but not foolish. Joe Fei, with 2 men, Zhong Wujin and Sun Tae, handled the security systems. I watched as they positioned small cameras near gates, along fences, even on neighboring rooftops with the owner's permission. By evening, they had set up a small command center in one of the mansion's rooms, screens flickering with different angles of the yard, street, and some interiors. Joe Fei sat there, focused, coordinating everything with remarkable precision. I stepped in to see how things were going. The monitors displayed shifting images of the grounds. Joe Fei spoke quietly into his radio to Sun Tae, who replied with clipped phrases in a mix of English and Korean. "We're almost done," Joe Fei said, turning toward me. "Now we should have the advantage. If anyone shows up, we'll know first." "Impressive," I praised sincerely, watching the crisp night vision feed. "Thank you." He glanced at me briefly and nodded. At that moment, Imhotep entered the room, scanning the monitors with approval. "Excellent work. Hopefully now we can catch whoever's been lurking around." His gaze shifted to me. "And you, little sister, remember, don't stick your neck out. If you need to go anywhere, take Joe Fei or one of the others with you." I wanted to snap back that I wasn't 5 years old, but I held my tongue. In recent days, I'd realized I no longer wished to provoke tension within the family. The enemy was already too close. When Imhotep left, Joe Fei continued typing notes on his laptop while Zhong Wujin and Sun Tae stepped out to check the signal. I studied his profile, focused, lips pressed together. His fingers flew across the keyboard so fast I thought it might start smoking. "So you're talented at more than just shooting," I remarked half-jokingly. "The Army taught me a lot," he shrugged. "And I had specialized training in security systems." "I can see that." "I admire you," slipped from my lips before I had time to think. For a second, he froze, staring at the screen. Then, almost awkwardly, he turned from the monitor to glance at me. For an instant, I could swear he smiled, the first time since my return. A faint, fleeting smile, but it was real. "Thank you," he said quietly. "All right, I need to finish this." I nodded, warmed by that small smile. It showed me we were beginning to find common ground. Perhaps all that separated us was fear and doubt. And maybe, together, we could overcome them. The next day, we had a plan, to set a trap and expose whoever was targeting me. Fei insisted that I play the role of bait, under his strict scenario and with full protection. At first, I protested, but then agreed. I wanted to step out of the victim role and contribute something. The plan was simple. I would go to a restaurant on the city's outskirts, pretending to have dinner with friends, while Joe Fei and the others followed covertly. If I was being watched, the pursuers would reveal themselves, and we could catch them. Imhotep opposed it furiously at first but eventually gave in to Joe Fei's reasoning. He was eager to end this hidden threat. So there I was, in a sleek black dress and coat, entering the restaurant Dalji. I ordered, sat at a window table, and studied the menu, feigning normalcy. Zhou Fei, Zhong Wujin, and Sun Te took up their positions inside and out. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. My chest tightened with tension. Maybe no one will come? Flickered a fragile hope. But after 20 minutes, I noticed 3 suspicious men at the entrance. They sat at the bar, drinking, but their eyes slid toward me. From the corner of my vision, I caught Zhou Fei's movement as he leaned against a column, posing as an ordinary guest. When I paid and stepped outside, the 3 men followed. I felt their footsteps behind me, slow, cautious. Fear surged, but I kept my back straight, heading for the car parked in a nearby alley. Suddenly, one of them quickened his pace, and I heard, "Hey, sweetheart, wait up." I bit my lip and spun around. "What do you want?" They drew closer, grins promising nothing good. One pulled a pistol from his waistband. "Looks like we've been sent to deliver you a message." He never finished. Zhou Fei appeared like a shadow, striking the weapon away, then delivered rapid, crushing blows. Zhong Wujin and Sun Te emerged from the dark, blocking the other 2. Within seconds, it was over. One tried to flee, but they tackled him quickly. Pressed against the wall, adrenaline flooding me, I trembled but stood my ground. Zhou Fei turned to check me. "You're all right?" "Yes," I nodded, though my heart was pounding wildly. "Good work," he said into his radio. "Call Mo Tao. Have him send people to collect these bastards." I saw the strange fire in his eyes. Protecting me mattered to him, and he had succeeded. I felt proud too, not for being the bait, but for holding myself together. We had worked as a team. When things settled, and the prisoners gave up only scraps of information the rest Mo Tao's men would handle, I approached Zhou Fei as he was about to get behind the wheel. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Without you, I would have." He cut me off with a brief gesture. "Don't mention it." I was there, as I promised. I smiled. And suddenly, he smiled back, warmly, genuinely, so much that it stole my breath. We drove home, and the whole way, I felt a bond taking root between us, respect, shared purpose, and something more. Like the warning tremor before a wave. Days passed. With new intel from the captured men, Mo Tao grew even grimmer, keeping everything to himself. What weighed on me most, though, was his suffocating overprotection. I was tired of feeling like a prisoner under the excuse of possible danger. So when I learned of a private party thrown by an old friend, I decided, to hell with the rules. I slipped out of the mansion while Zhou Fei was with Mo Tao. Around my neck hung a silver cross with a tracker, for emergencies only. The club swallowed me whole, loud music, flashing lights, the press of the crowd. I drank cocktails, chatted with friends, desperate to forget about the mafia and the threats. Just for a few hours. But my plan unraveled when I heard a sharp voice at the entrance. I recognized it instantly, Zhou Fei. He stood by the doors, sweeping the hall with a furious glare. When he spotted me, he stormed over like a tornado. "What the hell, Liang Na?" he growled, closing in on me. "Do you realize what you've done? Slipping out alone, no guards, at night, to a place like this." I lifted my chin, masking my unease with defiance. "I'm an adult. I can decide where to go." "Mo Tao will kill us both," he hissed through clenched teeth, seizing my wrist. "We're leaving." I yanked free, eyes flashing. "Don't you dare order me around, Zhou Fei. I came here to live like a normal person for once." His breath came heavy, his gaze burning as if he might tear me apart. In his eyes I saw rage and panic. He truly feared for me. Yet his fear only fueled my stubborn fire. "What's wrong? Afraid of taking responsibility?" I lashed out. Easier to hide behind Mo Tao's orders and reject everything else? Including My feelings? For a heartbeat, he froze. But then his grip clamped down again, dragging me toward the exit almost by force. I fought him, but his hold was iron. Let go! I shouted when we hit the parking lot, where it was quieter. He stopped abruptly, spinning me to face him. His breath scorched my skin, his body radiating tension. You. He began, words choking in his throat. You're reckless. You put your life on the line. And does that bother you? I shot back. Or are you just scared you'll fail my brother's order? His jaw tightened, fury blazing in his eyes. I realized too late I had gone too far. Shut up, he rasped, pinning me against the wall. And then his lips crashed onto mine in a wild, furious kiss. No tenderness, only raw passion and aggression, as if all our pent-up conflict burst loose. My heart hammered in my chest, my arms wound around his neck, surrendering to the madness. I felt the pounding of our hearts in unison, the harsh grip of his hands, the searing heat of his breath. It lasted only a few seconds that stretched into eternity, and then he tore himself away, looking at me with both despair and fury. Damn it! Was all he managed, stepping back. I stood pressed against the wall, trembling with adrenaline and the weight of what had just happened. He raked a hand through his hair, cursed under his breath, then said quietly, "We're going home. Now." I didn't argue. My emotions were still storming inside me, but I already knew we had crossed the line. Something truly forbidden had happened between us. There would be no turning back. After that kiss, I didn't know what to do with myself. We drove back to the mansion in silence, where an enraged Imhotep was waiting for me. He shouted about my irresponsibility, but his words barely reached me. My head echoed with only one thought: he kissed me. He kissed me. My lips still burned, as if his touch lingered there. Joe Fay reported to my brother, insisting he had acted within duty, though I could see how tense he was, like he might explode at any moment. To my surprise, he held his composure. After a short tirade, Imhotep waved me away. "Go to your room, Liang Na. We'll talk tomorrow." I left. Lying in bed, I replayed the kiss over and over. Rough, passionate, it made me shiver with heat. I had never felt anything like it before. Dirty, forbidden, but so real, so searing. I was torn between guilt and exhilaration. This was my brother's best friend, my bodyguard. He was 8 years older, cold, ruthless, yet I felt something for him I could no longer suppress. In the morning, I avoided his gaze. At breakfast, I ran into Zhong Wujin, who clearly sensed the tension in the air. Joe Fay, as if reading the situation, announced that he and I had urgent business outside. I only nodded, unsure how to act. It seemed he didn't know either. By noon, however, our family received new intel. There had been an attempted break-in at one of our supply warehouses. Imhotep dispatched Joe Fay with a team to check for an ambush. I was told to remain at home. I prowled the mansion like a caged tigress, my mind circling back to Joe Fay. What now? Will he avoid me? Or does he want me to? No answer came. In the hallway, I bumped into Imhotep, who rubbed his face wearily and said, "Liang Na, I know we clashed yesterday, but you must understand, I'm not trying to rob you of freedom. I'm trying to protect you." I gave him a sad smile. I know. It's just hard, having every choice made for me. Believe me, this is temporary, he sighed. I'll deal with the threats, and you'll live however you want. I wanted to say, I'm already living how I want, and it will end in disaster, but kept quiet. My brother still had no idea that something had happened between me and his best friend, something he would see as betrayal. By evening, Joe Fay returned. I waited in the hall, feeling a jolt of nervous energy when I saw him step out of the car. His face was tired, hair slightly disheveled. He glanced at me briefly, our eyes meeting for a heartbeat, before he looked away. He was keeping his distance. But I knew we had to talk. Night fell over the house. I wandered the corridors, restless. Then I heard footsteps and, in the dim light, saw his familiar figure. Our eyes locked. Joe Fay clenched his jaw, knowing the conversation was inevitable. Liam na, he began softly. I wanted to say. No, let me speak, I cut him off. I know that kiss was wrong. But I don't regret it. You can be cold, you can push me away, but I already know that's not all there is inside you. He stared at me, teeth clenched, as if he couldn't believe I dared to say it. There are too many barriers between us, he finally said. I have no right. You do. Or at least you can try, I insisted, my fists tightening. He exhaled heavily, as though fighting himself. For a moment, I thought he might storm out. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze flicking to my lips. Heat flooded me at that look. I realized then, there was no way back. We were falling into the abyss, and the ending no longer mattered. I stepped toward him, pressing a hand against his chest. Joe Fay shut his eyes, as if trying to wall off his desire, but couldn't. I leaned in and brushed a soft kiss against his neck. He groaned, seized my waist, and pulled me so close I could hardly breathe. This kiss was different, not as furious, but still full of passion. I felt the ground disappear, swept by a wave of longing and a quiet despair, because this love was forbidden, dangerous. Yet I could no longer stop it. When our lips parted, I felt him trembling as he gripped my shoulders. We can't, he whispered. I know, I answered, meeting his eyes. But that won't stop me. And he didn't argue. From that day on, our secret romance began. Painful and intoxicating all at once, we hid from everyone, the servants, the guards, and, of course, Imhotep. Every stolen touch, every chance encounter in the corridor crackled with electricity. The first time we met outside the house, it was in a cheap motel on the outskirts. Joe Fay insisted we couldn't risk being seen together anywhere respectable, we would be recognized. I remember trembling as I climbed the creaking wooden stairs. He held my hand, as if to say we were walking this path together. The room was tiny, with a squeaky bed and a view of the parking lot. Once the door shut, we looked at each other, guilt and desire mingling into something fierce. He gently set his hands on my waist, sliding them up my back, and I felt heat ignite inside me. My lips reached for his. At first the kiss was slow, as if we were rediscovering each other. But soon, passion flared, consuming every doubt. We fell onto the bed, his hands roaming my skin as I feverishly unbuttoned his shirt, pressing kisses along his collarbone, his chest, savoring each breath. My fingers shook with the realization this was truly happening. Liam na, he whispered, pain and desire in his voice. I don't want to hurt you. You won't, I answered, locking eyes with him. Unless you run away. He stroked my hair, and in his gaze was such tenderness it made my eyes sting. And then we stopped speaking, surrendering only to feeling. For the first time in my life, I experienced true intimacy, not just physical, but emotional, as though I had finally found someone who understood my soul. Joe Fay was hard and cautious, his hands strong, yet he showed a fragile care, exploring me as if building a temple from my sensations. Later, as we lay exhausted side by side, I traced my fingers across the scars on his side. He flinched but didn't pull away. Is this from a bullet? I asked softly. Yes, he breathed. Afghanistan. Long ago. I followed the scar with my finger, and his brow furrowed, shadows of memory crossing his face. Will you tell me? He was silent for a long while before answering. I lost 2 friends there. When I came back, I didn't know what to do with my life. Imhotep brought me into his ranks, gave me purpose. Said I could protect them, keep order. Is that why you're so loyal to him? I asked, realizing that my brother's friendship had saved him from the abyss. Yes, he said simply. I owe him. And I I'm afraid that if he finds out about us. We lay together for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms. Outside, the evening sky deepened into violet, and I studied his face, thinking, even if this is wrong, even if it's dangerous, I am happy in this moment. And nothing will make me give it up. Over time, our meetings became a bit more regular. Under the pretense of security checks, Joe Fay would pick me up in the car, and we would drive to quiet places where we could be alone. Sometimes it was the same motel, sometimes a small apartment downtown that my brother rented as a safe house, one we shamelessly occupied for our secret encounters. There we would talk heart to heart. One day, I gathered the courage to tell him about my dreams, opening my own design studio, bringing to Chicago a part of the European fashion I had grown to love. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions. I knew he was far from the world of creativity, but he sincerely tried to understand. I want to create things people will wear and be happy in, I spoke with passion. And even if our family is involved in other business, I want to live my own life. He nodded, squeezing my hand. You can do anything you want. You're strong and smart enough for it. His words encouraged me. Then I asked him, and what do you want for yourself? Not for immortal, not for duty, but just for yourself? He hunched over, hugging his knees, silent for several seconds. I've never really thought about it. I always believed that after the army, I had no other path. But you do, I objected. You're a person with your own desires. Don't you want a peaceful life? A family? He gave a bitter smile. A family? I'm not even sure I have the right. With my past. There's too much blood on my hands. I gently touched his cheek. Is that your fault? You defended your country, us, people. That doesn't make you a monster. He sighed and pressed into my palm. Maybe one day I'll be able to believe that. But for now, I only know how to fight and protect. Maybe it's time you learned how to love, I whispered, my heart pounding. Joe Fay looked into my eyes, his gaze full of inner struggle. Then he pulled me close, and we melted into a kiss. I felt his pain, his hope, and my own reckless love. I thought we had become closer than ever. In the silence, I realized that his walls could be broken, step by step, if only he allowed it. Our romance was like walking on a knife's edge. With every passing day, the tension grew, for everything in the house suggested that immortal was starting to suspect something. I caught his sideways glances and knew, sooner or later, the truth would surface. One night, as I was about to go to bed, there was a knock on my door. I opened it, and saw Joe Fay. My heart dropped. He had never come so openly before. But he looked agitated, his eyes burning. I couldn't sleep, he began, lowering his gaze to the floor. Sorry for disturbing you. I pulled him inside, slamming the door shut. A surge of fear pierced me, but stronger was the instinct. I didn't want to let him go. Without words, we rushed into each other's arms. It was wild, dangerous, passionate. My fingers tangled in his hair, his hands roamed hungrily over my body. The bed creaked beneath us, but we didn't care. This time, it happened right in my chambers, under immortal's very nose. The adrenaline made it even more intoxicating. I bit down on my lip to keep from crying out when the wave of pleasure washed over me, while Joe Fay bit his own lip until it bled to stifle a groan. It was insane risk, but also an indescribable thrill. I felt like I was losing my mind with every touch. Afterward, we lay quietly, pressed against each other, listening to the silence in the hallway. Joe Fay was breathing fast, as if he had been running. I thought about how we behaved like teenagers stealing moments of happiness, terrified of being caught. But I also understood this, it wasn't just desire. I was hopelessly in love with him. And the more time I spent with him, the deeper I sank into that passion. We can't take such risks, he whispered. Immortal. I know, I whispered back. But I can't help it. He grimaced, knowing we had no solution, only danger. And yet neither of us could force ourselves to break this bond. We kept walking the dangerous road, comforting ourselves with the illusion that somehow things would work out. But fate doesn't ask if we're ready for consequences. I got up, had breakfast, and went to the garden. Joe Fay was absent, perhaps on an errand for my brother. My head swirled with ideas for new projects. I wanted to work on the design of one of our restaurant's halls. But by noon, everything fell apart. M.O. Tao summoned me to his office. His voice was so cold it sent chills down my spine. When I entered, Joe Fay was already there, on his knees. My brother towered over him, his face contorted with rage. I gasped, rushing forward, but M.O. Tao stopped me with a gesture. Liam, nah, don't come closer. This isn't your concern. How can it not be mine? I exploded, my heart tearing apart at the sight of Joe Fay like a prisoner. He betrayed me, M.O. Tao hissed. He slept with my sister behind my back. You. He kicked Joe Fay in the side. You, the one I trusted with my life. I rushed to Fay, grabbing his shoulder. He was breathing heavily, he had clearly already been beaten. Stop it. I screamed at my brother. Don't you dare touch him. Silence. M.O. Tao roared. Do you even understand what he has done? We love each other. I blurted out, not thinking of the consequences. And I won't let you hurt him. At the word love, M.O. Tao paled, hatred flaring in his eyes. But instead of continuing the beating, he signaled 2 guards to pull me away. They grabbed my arms, but I struggled, shouting curses. M.O. Tao crouched before Fay, smirking like a predator. Joe Fay, he growled, you worked for me for years. I thought you were my best friend. And you betrayed me, crawling into bed with my sister, the one I entrusted you to protect. Joe Fay lifted his gaze, there was no fear, only bitterness. M.O. Tao, he rasped. This isn't a whim. I ask only one thing, don't punish her. This is my fault. Your fault. My brother repeated, rising. Then pay the price. Disappear from our lives. Never come near her again. No. I cried, tearing myself free from the guards. You can't force him to leave. But M.O. Tao was deaf to my pleas. His voice was cold, get out. Before I change my mind and do something worse. Joe Fay looked at me with guilt, as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't. They pulled him to his feet and shoved him out the door. I lunged after him, but M.O. Tao grabbed my arm, squeezing so hard it hurt. I'm doing this for you, he hissed. He used you. He's not worthy of you. Or me. You don't understand. I whispered through tears. He didn't use me, he loves me. Shut up. My brother roared. I don't want to hear another word. Then he ordered the guards to release me. I rushed out of the office, but it was too late. Joe Fay was already gone. The car he had arrived in sped away. I had no idea where he would go. At that moment, I realized I had lost him, and guilt tore me apart. Right after Joe Fay's expulsion, I tried to talk to M.O. Tao, begging him to reconsider. But he was unyielding. He shouted that I'd better forget that traitor altogether, or else he would do something worse, kill him, for example. I was trapped. My heart ached, I couldn't eat or sleep. Every corner of the house reminded me of him. I wandered through the rooms where we had been together, feeling the ghosts of his touch and kisses. Zhong Wujin and Song Tae tried to show me sympathy, but I pushed everyone away. My world had collapsed. One night I couldn't bear it anymore and sent him a text, forgive me. I can't live without you. Please, answer. But no reply came. I didn't know if his phone was turned off or if he was deliberately ignoring me to obey M.O. Tao's order and keep me out of danger. A week passed. I barely left my room. Through the servants, M.O. Tao sent messages saying he was taking care of me, but he hardly appeared himself. Maybe he felt guilty, or maybe he just didn't want to explain. Day after day I sank deeper into depression. I didn't care about the dangers that still existed out there. The only thing I could think of was that I had been deprived of the man I had loved with all my heart. And I was starting to lose my mind. Sometimes, when you least expect it, fate strikes an even harsher blow. I don't remember exactly how it happened. I think that day I finally decided to go out into the garden, to breathe some fresh air. I wanted to shake off the feeling of the stuffy room. Almost no one was around. For some reason, Mo Tao had pulled most of the guards for some urgent operation. Only Zhong Wujin had remained, but he had disappeared somewhere. I wandered among blooming bushes, absently looking at rose petals. Suddenly, someone clamped a hand over my mouth, while another grabbed my waist. I tried to scream but couldn't. A cloth with a sharp, chemical smell covered my nose and mouth, and I began to lose consciousness. The last thing I remembered was a hoarse male whisper, "Take her, let's go." When I came to, my head was splitting, and the stench of dampness and mold filled my nose. Around me was dim light, pierced only by a faint bulb overhead. I realized I was in some kind of abandoned basement. My hands were tied behind my back, my legs bound with rope. I tried desperately to break free, but it was useless. "Hey, she's awake?" A rough voice sneered as a shaved-headed man approached me. "Our prize is awake, boys." I looked around, 2 more men. I didn't know them, but I understood they were probably people who wanted revenge on Mo Tao. Now I was their hostage. My heart froze with terror. "Don't worry, sweetheart," the bald one grinned wickedly. "Soon your brother will be bowing at our feet. And if not, we'll find a use for you." I felt everything inside me tighten. They could kill me, humiliate me, abandon me. I didn't want to show fear, but my body trembled. I thought of Zhou Fei. What would he do? He'd already be fighting for my freedom. My eyes stung with treacherous tears. Hours passed. They barely touched me, only tossed me some water. Then came the sound of a phone call. One of the thugs was talking loudly, apparently negotiating with my family. I heard, "Long will pay." Or "She's done for." I shivered with despair. Suddenly, in the silence, a loud gunshot rang out, followed by a scream. The basement door burst open, and men in black stormed in. A shootout erupted. Bullets whistled over my head. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying not to scream. Then everything went quiet. "She's here," someone shouted in a familiar voice. I lifted my head and saw Zhou Fei. He stood in the doorway, gripping a pistol, blood blooming on his shoulder. He was wounded. I stared at him, unable to believe my eyes. Breathing heavily, he rushed toward me and cut the ropes. "Liam Na. God, are you all right?" he asked, holding my face, scanning me. I burst into tears, throwing my arms around his neck, unable to speak. He hugged me tightly, whispering, "It's okay, it's over." His presence became the only anchor in a sea of terror. Soon Mo Tao and his men ran into the basement. He saw me in Zhou Fei's arms, tensed as if he wanted to lunge at us, but instead quickly came over, checked my pulse, hugged me. His eyes showed fear and relief. "Zhou Fei." He exhaled, turning to his friend. "Damn it, you're wounded." Zhou Fei staggered. His shoulder wound looked serious, blood soaking his clothes. I cried out when he nearly collapsed. Mo Tao and I caught him, keeping him from falling. Zhong Wujin hurried to help. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. "Hurry." All my hatred toward my brother vanished in that moment, because I knew he and Zhou Fei had risked their lives together to bring me back. I wept, clutching Zhou Fei, feeling his heartbeat growing weaker. "Don't die, you hear me?" I whispered desperately. "I won't survive it." Zhou Fei opened his eyes, looked at me, and mouthed, "I came back. For you." And then he lost consciousness. The thought that he might die tore me apart. They rushed him to the hospital. Doctors immediately began surgery. I sat in the hallway, knees drawn to my chest. Mo Tao stood beside me, breathing heavily, Zhou Fei's blood staining his shirt. "Sister," he said quietly, I didn't think it would go this far." "I hope you're satisfied," I snapped, though I had no strength to argue. "If he dies, I'll leave. And I'll never forgive you." My voice carried cold determination. I saw Mo Tao flinch, as if slapped. He tried to argue, but I raised my hand, demanding silence. The only thing that mattered now was that Zhou Fei survived. Hours dragged on endlessly. Doctors came out, explaining his condition was critical, that the bullet had grazed a vessel but he had a chance. I prayed, to a God I thought I had long forgotten. But I asked only one thing: don't take him. At last, after endless hours, the surgeon came out and said the operation had been successful, though Zhou Fei would need time to recover. Mo Tao exhaled, covering his face with his hands. I burst into tears of relief. A mountain had lifted from my shoulders. When Zhou Fei was moved to a ward, I went in. Seeing him pale, covered in tubes and IVs, filled me with a surge of pity and love. I sat on the chair beside him, leaned close, listening to his quiet breathing. He was unconscious, but I took his hand and whispered, "I'll be here. I won't leave." Later, Mo Tao came in. He stood silently at the foot of the bed, staring at Zhou Fei for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I didn't expect he'd risk himself like this for you. Maybe I was wrong about him." I didn't reply. But I caught his gaze, and it was regret, maybe even remorse. He didn't ask for forgiveness aloud, that wasn't his way. But I understood that my brother was starting to rethink things. Zhou Fei regained consciousness a day later. When he opened his eyes, I grabbed his hand, smiling through tears. "You're alive." I was so scared. He tried to smile, his pale face barely twitching. "I promised I'd protect you." I laid my head on his chest, listening to the faint heartbeat, "And you saved me." "Fool. You risked your life." He stayed silent, only stroking my hair. In his eyes was that same depth that had drawn me to him from the very first day. I whispered, "Don't leave me again. Don't ever leave me." "I won't," he said. "Even if it means leaving your brother's world behind." At that moment, Mo Tao entered the ward. I straightened up, tense, expecting a conflict. But my brother only stepped up to the bed and stood opposite Zhou Fei. Silence filled the room. Then Mo Tao quietly said, "I won't deny it, I don't like this. But I can't deny what you did either. You saved Leona, risking your life." Zhou Fei parted his lips to say something, but Mo Tao raised a hand. "I can't. I'm not ready to bless your union. But I won't stand in your way anymore. If Liang chose you, then—" He hesitated, lowered his eyes. "Then she believes you're worthy. I can't lock her up for life." I held my breath. This wasn't support, but more like a surrender. And for Mo Tao, that was already a huge admission. Zhou Fei understood it too and nodded. "Thank you, boss." "Don't call me that," Mo Tao sighed, and for a moment I saw how he looked at his wounded friend, clearly moved. "Get well." He left, leaving us in a strange mix of shock and relief. I leaned down to Raphael again. "We did it." He smiled faintly. "Yes, my Liam nod." And I kissed his forehead, tasting the salt of tears. I knew a new chapter awaited us, and it wouldn't be easy. But the most important thing was that we no longer had to hide, and my brother would no longer tear us apart. Half a year passed. Much had changed. Zhou Fei recovered from his wound, took care of paperwork, and opened his own security firm. He was no longer someone's soldier or right hand. He had become independent, and that made both of us happy. I finally dared to fulfill my dream and opened a design studio, Argenti Design. Imhotep financed the first stage. Though he ground his teeth, he no longer wanted to quarrel with me, and he also understood it was a good investment, given my experience. I worked like possessed, creating interior, clothing, and accessory projects. My brand was gradually gaining popularity in Chicago. Joe Fay and I rented a small but cozy apartment downtown, separate from the family. At first, Imhotep grumbled that this might end badly, but later he accepted it. Maybe sometimes he still cast us wary glances, but he no longer interfered. I never knew life with the man I loved could be so harmonious. Joe Fay woke earlier than me, brewed coffee, then woke me with a gentle kiss. The intensity of our lovemaking sometimes reminded me of those first secret encounters, only now without the fear of being caught. I loved watching him undress on his way to the shower, then following him in, embracing him under the warm streams of water as we laughed, remembering how hard it once was to steal even a few minutes alone. In the evenings we often cooked together. He admitted that the army had taught him to make simple dishes, while I brought in European recipes. The experiments always ended the same way, in our bedroom, with wine and kisses. Sometimes we recalled the past, and it hurt to remember how much pain and struggle we had endured. But then we looked at each other and understood it had all been worth it. One evening, the phone rang. It was Imhotep. He said he wanted to come over for dinner. I was surprised. I hadn't expected such initiative from him, but agreed. Joe Fay tensed, then smiled. Maybe he wants to make peace. I nodded, though inside I was nervous. We set the table, cooked seafood pasta, salad, and opened wine. When Imhotep arrived, he looked around the apartment, small, but cozy. Not bad here, he said. Though unusual. I felt Joe Fay's tension, but he didn't show it openly. My brother nodded at him in greeting. They shook hands silently. Maybe it was a sign of truce. Over dinner, I tried to keep the conversation going. Imhotep asked Joe Fay about his firm, how things were going, whether he had clients. It turned out Imhotep was even willing to recommend his services to some acquaintances. A silent show of support, in his own way. When he left, Imhotep said at the door, "Take care of yourself, little sister. And if you need anything, come to me." I hugged him, thanked him. For the first time in a long while, I felt I had found balance between family and personal happiness. That same evening, Joe Fay and I climbed to the rooftop of our building. The night was clear, the city below glowing with millions of lights. I leaned against Joe Fay, resting my head on his shoulder. "Remember," I whispered, "how I once asked, 'Are you still my bodyguard?'" He smiled, gazing into the distance, "Yes." And I'd answer no. I turned to him, "And now?" He traced his finger along my cheek. "Now you guard my heart, Liam Knott." I smiled, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Then we kissed in the dark, above the city that had once witnessed our drama. And now it became the witness of our love, forbidden, dangerous, but in the end victorious. They say forbidden love is often doomed. But what is fate if not a chain of our choices? We chose to risk, and we survived. We made enemies, lost peace, but gained the most important thing, a mutual bond. People still ask me, "What's it like to live with a man who served your brother for so many years?" And I smile, he served duty. Now he's free to choose whom to be with. And if new enemies come in the future, I know, we'll face them together. Joe Fay taught me not to back down, and I taught him to believe he deserves happiness. And perhaps, that is worth every battle we endured.